Camilla stood there, wearing the wedding dress she had chosen with so much care, holding the bouquet of white flowers that trembled in her hands. There were only 2 hours left until the most anticipated wedding of her life, when Mrs. Beatrice, her fiancé Philip's mother, entered the bridal room like a storm. What she said at that moment almost destroyed everything Camilla had dreamed of. But what happened a few hours later at the altar was something that no one, not even Mrs. Beatrice, would ever expect. This is the story of how the worst day of a bride's life became the most incredible of all. Philip Mendoza came from one of the most traditional families in New York City. His father, Dr. Edward Mendoza, was a renowned surgeon who built a private clinic that served the Manhattan elite. Mrs. Beatrice, his mother, came from a family of wealthy landowners from upstate and always prided herself on her noble roots. As she liked to say, the Mendoza family lived in a mansion on the Upper East Side, frequented the most exclusive clubs, and maintained a lifestyle that bordered on ostentation. For Mrs. Beatrice, family reputation was more important than anything else in life. Philip, at 28, was a lawyer graduated from one of the country's best universities, worked at the family law firm, and was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in New York high society. He had everything a mother like Mrs. Beatrice could want: professional success, good looks, refined education, and a bright future ahead. But Philip had a problem in his mother's eyes. He had fallen in love with the wrong person. Camila Santos, 26, was a nurse at a public hospital in downtown Manhattan. Daughter of a construction worker and a seamstress, she had grown up in a modest neighborhood in Queens. Her parents, Mr. John and Mrs. Mary, were hard-working and honest people who made enormous sacrifices so Camilla could study. Camilla had always been a brilliant student. She got a scholarship to attend high school at a private school and later passed the entrance exam for nursing at a public university. During college, she worked part-time at a pharmacy to help with household expenses and still managed to maintain excellent grades. She was a woman of irreproachable character, dedicated, kind, and with a generous heart. On weekends, she did volunteer work at a community center in her neighborhood, teaching underprivileged children to read and write. But for Mrs. Beatrice, none of this mattered. All she saw was a girl without breeding, without family, and without a future, who had seduced her precious son. Philip and Camilla met in the most unexpected way possible. Philip was playing soccer with friends at a club when he twisted his ankle. He was taken to the nearest public hospital, where Camilla worked the night shift. When Philip arrived at the emergency room, he was nervous and impatient. He wasn't used to public hospitals, the delays, the simplicity of care. Camilla was the nurse assigned to take care of him. "Sir, you need to stay calm," Camilla said with her sweet but firm voice. "I know it's not comfortable, but we'll take good care of you." Philip, who was ready to complain about everything, was immediately impressed by Camilla's kindness and professionalism. She treated him with the same care and attention she would give any patient, regardless of their social class. During the 3 hours Philip stayed at the hospital, he and Camilla talked about everything: work, dreams, family, life philosophy. Philip discovered he was facing an intelligent, cultured, interesting, and above all, genuine woman. When he was discharged, Philip asked for Camilla's number. She hesitated. A patient asking for her number wasn't common, but something about him made her trust. Philip and Camilla began meeting discreetly. He knew his family wouldn't approve of the relationship, so he decided to keep it secret until he was sure of his feelings. In their first dates, Philip tried to impress Camilla by taking her to expensive restaurants and sophisticated places, but he soon realized she felt uncomfortable in those environments. Camilla preferred simple places, deep conversations, walks in the park. "Philip," she said on one of their dates, "I don't need expensive places to be happy. I'd rather have a sandwich in a park with you than the best restaurant in the city with someone else." It was at that moment that Philip understood he had found something rare. A person who loved him for who he was, not for what he had. For 6 months, they met in secret. Philip met Camilla's family and was enchanted by the simplicity and genuine love he found in the small house in Queens. Mr. John and Mrs. Mary welcomed him like a son, not knowing who he really was or where he came from. "My daughter has never brought anyone here," Mrs. Mary told Philip, "but I see in her eyes that you're special. I just ask that you take good care of my girl's heart." After 8 months of dating, Philip decided it was time to tell his family about Camilla. He was in love and wanted to marry her, so he needed his parents' approval. The conversation happened during a Sunday dinner at the Mendoza mansion. Philip had prepared a speech, thought about how to approach the subject in the best possible way. "Dad, Mom," Philip began, "I need to tell you something important. I've been dating for 8 months and, well, I'm in love. I want to get married." "Doctor," Edward smiled. "What great news, son. Who's the lucky girl? Is it Dr. Santos's daughter or Mrs. Margaret's granddaughter?" "No, Dad. Her name is Camilla Santos. She's a nurse." The silence that followed was embarrassing. Mrs. Beatrice dropped her fork on the plate. "A nurse?" she repeated, as if the word were profanity. "Yes, Mom. A wonderful person, intelligent, caring." "Philip," Dr. Edward interrupted, "where did you meet this girl?" When Philip told the whole story, the reaction was explosive. Mrs. Beatrice got up from the table, red with anger. "I won't allow it," she screamed. "A son of mine won't marry some nobody from Queens. What a shame. What will our friends think? Our family?" "Mom, you don't even know Camilla. And I don't want to know her," Mrs. Beatrice continued. "Philip, you're going to end this relationship today. I won't accept any discussion." Philip refused to break up with Camilla, and this started a real family war. Mrs. Beatrice used every weapon she had: emotional blackmail, social pressure, financial threats. "If you marry that woman," Dr. Edward said, "you can forget your inheritance, forget the family firm, forget everything we've built." Mrs. Beatrice went so far as to hire a private detective to investigate Camilla's life, looking for some dirt she could use against her. But what the detective found only confirmed what Philip already knew. Camilla was a person of integrity, with no scandals in her past. For months, the family tried to sabotage the relationship. Mrs. Beatrice even went to the hospital where Camilla worked to try to humiliate her publicly. "Listen carefully, young lady," Mrs. Beatrice told Camilla in front of work colleagues. "You may have fooled my son, but I know people like you. You're after the family money, aren't you? Well, know that I'll never allow a gold digger like you to enter our family." Camilla, with all her dignity, responded calmly, "Ma'am, I respect your concern for your son. But I love Philip for the man he is, not for what he has. And if you ever want to truly know me, my door will be open." Despite all the family pressure, Philip decided to move forward. On a special night, he took Camilla to the place where they had their first date, a small cafe downtown, and asked for her hand in marriage. "Camilla," Philip said, kneeling, "I know my family is making everything difficult. I know you've suffered because of this, but I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Camilla, with tears in her eyes, said yes. The marriage proposal was the final trigger for Mrs. Beatrice. She made one last desperate attempt. She offered money for Camilla to give up the wedding. "How much do you want?" Mrs. Beatrice asked. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. What's your price to get out of my son's life?" Camilla looked at Mrs. Beatrice with a mixture of sadness and pity. "Ma'am, there's no money in the world that would make me stop loving your son. But I can see that you're suffering with this situation. Maybe one day we can really talk, from mother to future daughter-in-law." Philip and Camilla decided to have a simple but beautiful wedding. Even with his privileged financial situation, Philip respected Camilla's desire not to be ostentatious. They chose a small church and a modest hall for the reception. Camilla's family was radiant. Mr. John had taken a loan to buy a new suit, and Mrs. Mary had hand-sewn some details of her daughter's dress. It was a wedding with love, but with limited resources. On the Mendoza family side, only Dr. Edward confirmed attendance, and even reluctantly, Mrs. Beatrice flatly refused to participate and forbade other relatives from attending. "If you go to that circus," Mrs. Beatrice told her in-laws and cousins, "you'll be betraying me too." The week before the wedding, Dr. Edward tried one last conversation with his son. "Philip, there's still time to cancel everything. Your mother is sick with grief. Think about the family." "Dad," Philip replied, "I love you both, but I also love Camilla. She's going to be my wife, and I hope someday you can accept that." On the wedding day, Camilla was getting ready in a small room at the church with her friends and family. The dress, though simple, looked beautiful on her. Her friends from the hospital had pooled money to pay for a makeup artist, and Camilla was radiant. Mrs. Mary was crying with emotion. "My daughter, you're the most beautiful thing in the world. Philip is a lucky man." Mr. John, awkward in his new suit, kept repeating, "My princess, Daddy is so proud of you." On Philip's side, the atmosphere was more tense. Few relatives had shown up, and Mrs. Beatrice had made sure to communicate her absence to everyone. Philip tried to hide his sadness, but it was visible that his mother's absence hurt him deeply. It was at that moment that Mrs. Beatrice appeared. 2 hours before the ceremony, Mrs. Beatrice entered the room where Camilla was getting ready. Everyone present fell into total silence. The mother-in-law was elegantly dressed, but with an expression of determination that was frightening. "Everyone out," Mrs. Beatrice ordered. "I want to talk to her alone." Mrs. Mary tried to protest, but Camilla signaled for everyone to leave. She knew that sooner or later this conversation would have to happen. When they were alone, Mrs. Beatrice looked Camilla up and down, analyzing every detail of the simple dress, the modest hairstyle, the discreet makeup. "You'll never marry my son," Mrs. Beatrice said, with a voice loaded with hatred and desperation. Camilla took a deep breath before responding. "Mrs. Beatrice, you have the right not to like me, but you don't have the right to decide Philip's life. He's an adult man and made his choice." "His choice?" Mrs. Beatrice gave a bitter laugh. "You think he really chose you? You bewitched him, manipulated a vulnerable man." "Ma'am, I understand your pain. It must be difficult to see a son distancing himself. But I'm not your enemy. I love Philip, and I'll take good care of him." "You have nothing to do with our family," Mrs. Beatrice screamed, completely losing her composure. "You're an invader, an opportunist, and I'm going to prove to everyone what kind of person you really are." "How do you intend to do that?" Camilla asked, still maintaining her calm. Mrs. Beatrice smiled cruelly. "You'll see. During the ceremony, I'm going to stand up and tell everyone present who you really are. I'm going to expose your family of poor people, your humble origins. I'm going to humiliate you in front of everyone. I'm going to destroy this ridiculous little theater you've set up." Camilla felt tears coming to her eyes, but didn't let herself be defeated. "Do what you think is necessary. I'm not ashamed of who I am or where I come from. My family may be simple, but it's full of love and dignity." "Dignity?" Mrs. Beatrice laughed with contempt. "What dignity? You're from the slums, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." And she left the room slamming the door, leaving Camilla alone and shaken. Camilla stayed alone for a few minutes, trying to compose herself. Mrs. Beatrice's words had hurt deeply, not because of the insults directed at her, but because of how the mother-in-law had disrespected her family. Her friends returned to the room and found Camilla crying discreetly. "What happened?" asked Lucy, her best friend. "What did that woman say to you?" Camilla told everything. The group of friends was outraged. Camila, you don't have to go through this, said Fernanda, another nurse. If you want, we can cancel everything. Now. No, Camilla said, wiping her tears and looking at herself in the mirror. I love Philip, and I won't let anyone's prejudice destroy our happiness. If she wants to humiliate me publicly, let her. I'll face it with my head held high. Mrs. Mary, who had heard part of the conversation, approached her daughter. My daughter, that woman doesn't know us. Doesn't know the struggles we've been through, the values we taught you. You're going to get married with your head held high because you deserve this happiness. The church was decorated simply, but with great care. Field flowers, white candles, delicate ribbons. It was a welcoming environment full of love. On the groom's side, few relatives were present. On the bride's side, the church was full. Work colleagues, neighbors, community friends, humble but happy relatives. Philip waited at the altar, visibly nervous. He knew his mother was present. He had seen her enter during preparations, but didn't know what her intention was. Dr. Edward was in the front row, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation, but fulfilling his promise to be present. Mrs. Beatrice had strategically seated herself in the middle of the church, where she could be seen by everyone when she stood up to make her exposure speech. The music began to play, and Camilla appeared at the back of the church, beautiful and radiant, despite all the tension. Mr. John accompanied her, proud and emotional. The ceremony began normally. The priest made his initial considerations about matrimony, spoke about love, companionship, and mutual respect. Philip and Camilla exchanged passionate looks, trying to ignore the tension that hung in the air because of Mrs. Beatrice's presence. It was at the moment of vows that everything changed. If anyone present has any objection to this union, the priest said, following traditional ritual, speak now or forever hold your peace. Mrs. Beatrice immediately stood up. A murmur of tension spread through the church. Philip closed his eyes, preparing for the worst. Camilla gripped her bouquet tightly but maintained her dignity. I have something to say, Mrs. Beatrice declared with a loud and clear voice. Everyone turned to look at her. The silence was total. Mrs. Beatrice walked to the altar, looked at Camilla, then at Philip, and then addressed the entire congregation. For months, I opposed this wedding. I thought I knew this girl, thought I knew what kind of person she was. But yesterday I discovered something that changed everything. Philip and Camilla looked at each other, confused. What had Mrs. Beatrice discovered? Yesterday afternoon, Mrs. Beatrice continued, I went to the hospital where Camilla works, not to visit her, but to try to find more reasons to prevent this wedding. I wanted to talk to her colleagues, try to discover some flaw, some character, defect I could use. The congregation listened in absolute silence. But what I discovered was something completely different, Mrs. Beatrice continued, her voice beginning to fail. I talked to doctors, nurses, patients, and do you know what they all told me about Camilla? She paused, clearly emotional. They told me she's the most dedicated nurse they've ever known, that she works double shifts to cover for colleagues who get sick, that she uses her own money to buy medicine for patients who can't afford it, that she stays after hours consoling families who have lost loved ones. Camilla was surprised. She had no idea that her small acts of kindness were so noticed. But that wasn't all, Mrs. Beatrice continued. I discovered that Camilla maintains, with her own salary, scholarships for 3 underprivileged children from her community. That on Sundays she goes to the community center to teach children to read. That when her elderly neighbor got sick, she cared for her for months without accepting a penny. Tears began to roll down Mrs. Beatrice's face. And then, I understood that my son didn't choose just anyone to marry. He chose an angel. Mrs. Beatrice approached Camilla, who was completely surprised by this turn of events. Camilla, Mrs. Beatrice said, holding her daughter-in-law's hands, I ask for your forgiveness. I judged you by your origin, your money, your social class, but I didn't look at your heart. And now I see that my son is right. You're exactly the kind of person I would want him to marry." Camilla was crying, but they were tears of relief and emotion. "More than that," Mrs. Beatrice continued, "I discovered that you have values that our family lost over time. You remind us what really matters in life: kindness, generosity, love for others." Philip was emotional, seeing his mother finally recognize Camilla's qualities. "Please," Mrs. Beatrice said to the entire congregation, "forgive a prejudiced mother who almost destroyed her own son's happiness because of her small and limited ideas." Mrs. Beatrice addressed the priest. "Father, if you'll allow me, I'd like to give my official blessing to this union." The priest, also moved by the scene, agreed. "Philip, my dear son," Mrs. Beatrice said, "you showed wisdom that I didn't have. You chose a companion based on character, not bank account. Camilla, my daughter, may I call you daughter? You taught me that true wealth is in the values we carry in our hearts." She took from her neck a pearl necklace that had belonged to her family for generations. "This necklace belonged to my grandmother, then to my mother, then to me. I always dreamed of giving it to my son's wife. Camilla, you deserve to wear this not for its material value, but for the love and tradition it represents." Camilla was speechless as Mrs. Beatrice placed the necklace around her neck. The ceremony continued in a completely transformed atmosphere. What had begun with tension and hostility became a celebration of love and reconciliation. When the priest asked, "Philip, do you accept Camilla as your wife?" and he answered, "Yes, I do," the church exploded in applause. When it was Camilla's turn to answer, "Yes, I do," Mrs. Beatrice was the first to stand up and applaud. At the moment of the kiss, the entire church was standing, including Dr. Edward, who finally showed he was happy with the union. The reception, which would have been simple, ended up becoming even more special. Mrs. Beatrice, overcome with remorse and joy from the reconciliation, insisted on helping to pay for some extra costs of the celebration. "I won't accept," Camilla said. "You don't need to do this." "I do need to," Mrs. Beatrice replied. "I need to show that I recognize my mistake and that I want to be part of this family for real." During the reception, Mrs. Beatrice made sure to talk to all of Camilla's relatives. She met Mr. John and Mrs. Mary, talked to the nurse friends, heard stories about the community where Camilla grew up. "How blind I was," Mrs. Beatrice told Mrs. Mary. "Your daughter is a treasure, and I almost pushed her away from our family out of pure prejudice." Mrs. Mary, with her simple wisdom, replied, "Mrs. Beatrice, what's important is that you opened your heart in time. Now we're family." At speech time, Mrs. Beatrice asked to speak. "Friends and family," she began, "today I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned that a person's value isn't in what they have, but in what they are. I learned that true wealth isn't in the bank, but in the heart." She looked at Camilla. "My daughter, because now you are my daughter. You taught me that generosity is worth more than money, that kindness is worth more than social status, that love is worth more than any social convention." Tears rolled down her face. "I almost lost my son because of my prejudice. I almost deprived our family of gaining an angel like you. But I promise that from today on, I'll try to be the mother-in-law you deserve." The entire reception was moved. Even people who didn't know the family story well were touched by Mrs. Beatrice's sincerity. In the months following the wedding, the family dynamic changed completely. Mrs. Beatrice became a present and caring mother-in-law. She visited Camilla at the hospital, learned about her daughter-in-law's volunteer work at the community center, and even began participating in some charitable activities. "Camilla opened my eyes to a world I didn't know," Mrs. Beatrice told her high society friends. "A world where people help each other without expecting anything in return, where solidarity is more important than competition." Dr. Edward also changed. He began to value social work more and even started doing free consultations at the clinic once a week. My daughter-in-law reminded me why I became a doctor, he told Philip, to help people, not just to make money. Philip was radiant seeing his family united and his wife being valued as she deserved. 6 months after the wedding, Mrs. Beatrice had an idea. "Camilla, how about we create a foundation together to help needy families with health issues?" The idea evolved into something bigger. The Mendoza family used their resources and connections, while Camilla contributed her practical experience and knowledge of the community's real needs. Thus was born the Hope Foundation, which offered free medical care, medicine distribution, and educational programs for underprivileged communities. "I never imagined I could do so much good using my resources this way," Mrs. Beatrice said. "Camilla showed me that money only makes sense when used to help others." A year and a half after the wedding, Camilla became pregnant. The news was received with celebration by the entire family, but especially by Mrs. Beatrice, who had become an extremely dedicated mother-in-law. "This baby will be born into a family united by love," Mrs. Beatrice said, caressing Camilla's belly, "and will learn from an early age that people's value isn't in what they have, but in what they are." The baby, when born, was baptized Gabriel in honor of his maternal grandfather. The baptism ceremony was a reflection of family unity, simple, but full of love and meaning. Mrs. Beatrice became an active advocate for social equality. She used her position in high society to break prejudices and promote inclusion. Before meeting Camilla, she said in a lecture to a group of business people, "I thought social class defined character. Today I know I was completely wrong. The most upright people I know come from the humblest origins." She began being invited to speak about class prejudice and personal transformation, always telling her own story as an example. 5 years after that transformative wedding, the family was gathered to celebrate Gabriel's birthday, who was turning 3. At the party were both the wealthy Mendoza family and the simple Santos family, all mixed together, all happy, all united by the love that Camilla and Philip had built. Mrs. Beatrice, playing with her grandson in the garden, reflected on her journey. "How foolish I was. I almost lost the most important people in my life because of silly prejudices." Camilla, watching the scene, said to Philip, "Your mother became the grandmother I always dreamed of for our children." "And you became the daughter she always wanted to have," Philip replied, hugging his wife. The Hope Foundation had grown and now served more than 5 underprivileged communities. Mrs. Beatrice had become one of the main financiers and Camilla the general coordinator of the project. "You know," Mrs. Beatrice told Camilla during the party, "I always thought my mission in life was to protect the family's wealth. Today I know that my true mission is to use that wealth to do good." Mr. John and Mrs. Mary, who were now frequent visitors to the Mendoza mansion, felt at home. "Who would have thought," Mr. John commented with Dr. Edward, "that our families, so different, would become one?" That wedding that almost didn't happen because of prejudice became an example of transformation and love in the community. The story of Mrs. Beatrice and Camilla was told as an example of how love can overcome any social barrier. Gabriel grew up seeing Grandma Beatrice and Grandma Mary as 2 equally important women in his life, learning from an early age that real wealth is in the relationships we build. The small church where they got married became a symbol in the community. Many couples asked to get married there, inspired by the love story that overcame prejudice. In an interview for a magazine some years later, Mrs. Beatrice summarized her transformation. "I almost destroyed my son's happiness because of empty concepts about social class. I learned that love doesn't know bank accounts, doesn't know last names, doesn't know addresses. Love only knows hearts." Camilla, in the same interview, said, "I never hated my mother-in-law, even when she rejected me. I knew that behind that hostility was a mother afraid of losing her son. When she understood that I wasn't there to steal Philip from her, but to love him together with her, everything changed. Philip concluded, "Our story proves that people can change, that prejudice can be overcome by love, and that the strongest families are those built on true values, not social status." And so what began as a wedding almost destroyed by prejudice became a story of love, transformation, and unity that inspired many other families to rethink their values and prejudices. So what did you think of this incredible transformation? Story? Did Mrs. Beatrice completely redeem herself, or did she still have more to learn? Leave your opinion in the comments. And always remember, true love doesn't know social class, doesn't know bank accounts, doesn't know last names. Love only knows hearts. Sometimes, the people who resist love the most are the ones who need it most to transform themselves. If you liked this emotional story of prejudice overcome by love, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our heartwarming stories. And hit that notification bell to be the first to watch. See you in the next story.